Hello everyone, and welcome back to another adventure. Today we will be counting down my top 25 coasters from 2023. So let's just jump right into this. Before we begin, I just wanted to say that this list will contain spoilers for some amazing coasters. Now let's start off with some honorable mention. For the first honorable mention, we have Apollo's Chariot at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. The original B&M Hyper coaster is definitely still going strong, with some nice airtime and good forces, as well as comfortable trains. This one is definitely one of the best B&M Hypers out there, but not quite good enough to make my top 5. The second honorable mention is Texas Stingray at SeaWorld San Antonio, and there is definitely nothing family about this GCI family Woodie. The ride combines some really great lateral forces with a couple of pops of airtime and is pretty smooth for a Woodie. The trains are comfortable but don't allow for as much airtime as could be there, so this just barely misses my top 25, although this holds a special place in my heart as this was my 200th credit. Now for the actual list. And before we start, I have been on 231 coasters on every coast of the US, but these are still just my personal opinions. At number 25, we have Wild Eagle at Dollywood. This is a super graceful B&M Wing coaster with good positives and whippy inversions. The ride is very smooth and comfortable with some small airtime pops, although I will say the ride has an amazing setting on the mountain with a decent length, and overall I would have to say it's a very enjoyable ride. Now Wild Eagle has a straight down drop, which is different from Gatekeeper, which has a wing over drop. Personally, I found the straight down drop to be a little bit better as it provided some more airtime versus the wing over, but overall, very enjoyable ride. At number 24, we have Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This B&M Flyer is just crazy. For most of the ride, it's super graceful, pulling some pretty good forces with nice swooping sensations and graceful inversions, while you feel like a real dragon flying over the top of the mountain in the middle of the park. That is, until you reach the pretzel loop, where the ride just feels like it's trying to absolutely rip your head off in a spectacular display of vertical G-forces before one last pop of ejector airtime into the brake. I just absolutely love Tatsu, just the way you feel like a dragon flying on the mountain, as I said before. It's such a fun experience, the way the inversions are taken, just the way you feel when you're on that ride. It's such a freeing and flying sensation. And I found these trains to be more comfortable than the other flying coaster trains like Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. I love Tatsu, and that pretzel loop is absolutely just bonkers. At number 23, we have Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. Most people consider this to be the best B&M Hyper, and I have to say, after some of my more recent rides, it definitely is, at least out of the handful that I've been on, the best. Like, the ride just combines strong flow-ejector airtime, especially on that hill after the wave turn, with some nice positives in the valleys, add on the amazing clamshell restraints, and some pretty decent theming, at least in the queue and station, and it makes for a very good ride on Mako. If you want a full in-depth review of this ride, go check out my January random coaster review for the full review of the ride. At number 22, we have Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. This insane Intamin Accelerator was one of the best coasters at Cedar Point, and while the ride was short, but so sweet. Combining the punchy launch, speed of the coaster, amazing views and airtime at the top, plus those super low to the ground, comfortable trains with the T-bar restraints, it was just phenomenal. And then the way you just pick up speed as you're spiraling straight 90 degrees towards the ground just made for an absolutely surreal experience. And I hope Top Thrill 2 can live up to the original. At number 21, we have Maverick, also at Cedar Point. The original Intamin Blitz may be one of the shortest, as far as height goes, in thrill coasters at Cedar Point, but man, does this little thing pack a punch. The ride is just whip and ejector airtime from start to finish, and while the trains aren't the best, the ride experience itself more than makes up for it. There is no doubt in my mind that as of last year, Maverick is easily the best coaster at Cedar Point. Even without that phenomenal looking barrel roll, just the way that it takes those, I don't quite remember what they're called, but those, they're almost like a wave turn, but a lot snappier. Just crazy whip and ejector airtime, the low to the ground transitions, the drop in the back, and then that second 70-mile-an-hour launch coming from an almost dead stop just makes Maverick such an amazing coaster, and I just can't wait to get back on it when I return to Cedar Point. At number 20, we have Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. This is an older generation RMC iBox, and it can definitely hold its own against the newer iBox coasters. The ride, especially on rainy days, has insane amounts of ejector airtime and nice floaty inversions, which is quite unusual for an RMC. Normally they have faster, snappier inversions, but this one you actually got some nice zero-G feeling on it. The trains aren't the best, and the ride has some pretty inconsistent pacing, but when it's running good, the ride is just phenomenal. That double, I believe it was a double down. It's been a year or two since I've been on the ride, but just the way that it interacts with the structure, the trains are cool aesthetically, as far as like the Zero car on the front is pretty neat. Just overall, I thoroughly enjoy Wicked Cyclone, though it can run inconsistent. Now, jumping from one end of the spectrum to the other, at number 19, we have RE Force 1 at Fun Spot Atlanta. This is a new generation RMC iBox, and I got to ride it only a couple days after it opened on a cool morning with an empty train, and I only got to do it once because the ride broke down. But wow, just wow, was this ride crazy. While the drop and the Raven Trust Dive didn't have as much airtime as the rest of the ride, this featured two of the whippiest inversions I've ever experienced. Now, there are two other inversions that I find whippier, but the arcade roll and the second barrel roll, I guess that would be arcade roll number 2, were just crazy whippy. I was not expecting it. Again, this double up has good pops of ejector airtime, and then that quad down at the end was just, it was insane, but it was not painful like Steel Vengeance's ending. It was just super graceful, but yet full of ejector airtime, at least the quad down was. Like I said, I did not get to ride it running at its full speed, but I can definitely say that last pop up into the brakes definitely punches you in the gut, but the ride is just a ton of fun and an awesome RMC iBox. At number 18, we have El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Now, I actually rode this Intamin Prefab for the first time not 2 months before the second accident. And again, this was another crazy experience. The coaster has insane airtime on the back-to-back camelbacks, good forces in the valleys, and I definitely enjoyed the twister section. It reminded me like a very intense wooden version of Cheetah Hunt. The trains were quite comfortable. I did get stapled on 1 or 2 of my rides, but not bad. When I rode it, it was definitely a back row ride. It was smoother in the back, but not overly smooth. Did have some jackhammering, which I excused it because it's a wooden coaster. I don't want it to be super smooth, but the front was unbearably rough. But overall, it was just crazy intense and had a lot of good moments and elements. At number 17, we have Boulder Dash at Lake Compounce. This CCI Woodie had just received new Titan track on the drop, so that was glass smooth, but the rest of the ride, well, it was quite rough. It was actually surprised me with how rough the ride was. And I will say the Titan track, well, it didn't affect the ride experience. It did have a weird vibration going over it. I think that's just because of the metal wheels coming in contact with the metal track. Although I found that the roughness of it added to just the insane, out of control nature of the ride. Because it's so much like the Beast, but with more ejector airtime and even more laterals. Like, I was surprised with how many laterals were actually on this ride, especially on that first half and the first drop. And then the second half just has crazy ejector airtime. You literally feel like a boulder dashing among the mountain through the trees and everything. It was just, it's crazy. I can't wait to go back and ride it again. And the trains were very comfortable. They were the CCI trains, but I personally do enjoy those trains. It was just overall like an amazing mountain coaster. The way it used the terrain and everything was perfection. It does not rank higher because the roughness was a little bit hard to re-ride. At number 16, we have Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. Many consider this RMC Hyper Hybrid to be the best on the planet. And after some of my more recent rides, it has definitely been running much better so far in the 2024 season versus the 2023 season. But regardless, the ride has some crazy powerful ejector airtime, paired with the second whippiest inversion I've experienced, that being the death roll. And the trains are pretty comfortable for an RMC, being their newer trains. The drop is really fun. Great forces in the valleys. This is a more forces-focused RMC than airtime, but I'll tell you, that sideways airtime and the wave turn over the station is just phenomenal. Overall, the ride is just a crazy experience and by far one of the best in Florida. It's just that other coasters are better. At number 15, we have Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. This is the second ever iBox coaster, and it has definitely held its own. The ride has one of the best first drops on any RMC, especially at night with the whip and the tunnel. The quarry crawl was definitely not present when I rode, and the ride has some good ejector as well as forces, and in my controversial opinion, I think the old Gerstlauer trains on this one are the best and most comfortable RMC trains. But overall, I just thoroughly enjoy Iron Rattler for its smoothness and pretty good airtime and forces. At number 14, we have Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Universal Islands of Adventure. This Intamin multi-launch coaster just packs so much into the layout. The theming is crazy, and I love how close to the ground you get. The animatronics, including Hagrid and Fluffy, are incredibly lifelike, though Hagrid is getting a little stiff, but still, like, just very lifelike and some of the better animatronics Universal has ever created. The coaster itself has some nice pops of airtime, especially after the third launch coming out of the hut, and some nice, surprisingly whippy transitions in the low-to-the-ground twister section over the water. The launches are also surprisingly punchy for a coaster that only has a top speed of 50 miles an hour, but I guess that just comes with the nature of InDrive Tech LSM launches, because every Intamin coaster with InDrive Tech launches has very, very punchy launches. The backwards section and drop track adds some nice, different elements that aren't on a lot of other US coasters. And the soundtrack and narration is nice, plus the seating style is fun. The way that you can lean on the bike and just follow the movements of the coaster adds a bit of dynamics to the ride. But the restraints can staple you quite a bit sometimes if you're not careful. But just overall, Hagrid's is such a just pure fun coaster. At number 13, we have Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. Now, I know this is a controversial opinion, but I personally prefer Dr. Diabolical to Iron Rattler. But again, these are just my personal opinions. But this was an amazing small-scale B&M dive coaster. Normally, the larger ones are better, but in this instance, the small scale was definitely it was just better. The Beyond Vertical Drop definitely adds an extra pop of airtime, and the Triangle Hill has another good pop of airtime. It doesn't, it looks like it would, and it's not as strong as you would think. It's not like Magnum's Triangle Hills. It's more shaped properly, I guess. but it still provides a nice good pop of ejector airtime, which is not something that's common on dive coasters. Normally they feature drawn-out, powerful floater versus sharp and whippy ejector. There are also some good forces in the valleys, and especially in the helices, where you get very close to the ground. The coaster just pulls some great forces overall, and personally, I find the vest restraints to add to the ride versus take away. My only real issue with the ride is it has a nasty shuffle on the outside seats, and it's a newer coaster, so that kind of took away from the ride experience a little bit, but if you rode in the middle, it was amazing. 8 back-to-back night rides in the middle seat without having to even step off the train once during Roller Coaster Rodeo. So I would definitely say I enjoyed this coaster a lot. At number 12, we have Pipeline the Surf Coaster at SeaWorld Orlando. This was the first ever B&M Surf Coaster, and man, is this thing crazy. The shifting of the seats combined with jumping allows for ample, insane airtime. The kick on the launch just literally lifts you off your feet before you're slammed back down and then picked back up again by the mid-launch airtime hill, which has some surprising airtime that I did not expect. Every element delivers some kind of unique force, even the final brakes. This is the only coaster that I have ever grayed out on, and it's just so intense. Even the hammerhead turns have some pretty good forces and some surprising airtime. But don't try and jump on the corkscrew because you're not going anywhere and you'll probably just hurt your knees. I learned that the hard way. The heart lining on the final turn is weird but fun. Just the way that you kind of whip into the brakes and then glide in. It's so unique and just different. And I find the trains to be quite comfortable. The vests are a little bit tight, but not too bad. And I definitely don't get anything smashed on this ride like some of the... Well, I've never had the problem. Some other people find the older stand-up coasters to not be the most comfortable. And overall, I just thoroughly enjoy the ride. At number 11, we have Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. This is the most, or one of the most, out-of-control coaster experiences I've ever had. With just insane laterals and some of the most airtime on the planet. You literally feel like an out-of-control truck driving through the forest. I was laughing my butt off the whole time, just back to back to back, airtime hills and laterals combined. The ride is just insane. The way you go out into the woods, it's just so amazing. And the theming is not bad, but honestly, the shed could be removed, and I wouldn't even care, because the ride is just that good. It's so much fun to ride. Like, it's not super forceful. It does have a lot of airtime and laterals, but it's just a really, really fun coaster. Like, I always come off that ride smiling and laughing my butt off just because of how crazy it is. And I honestly don't know why I don't have this higher. I guess it's just because I enjoy other coasters more, and I've been on other coasters more recently than this one, as it's been a couple of years since I've rode Mystic. And now we have reached my top 10. And for number 10, we have Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. The park advertises this as a mock family launch coaster, and just like Texas Stingray, this is no family coaster. The ride is just pure insanity. People say the launches are weak. I don't find that to be true at all. Now, they aren't as punchy as some other coaster launches, but they have some surprising punches to them. The first loop and inverted top hat have some amazing hang time, and the whippy corkscrew and the second loop, especially on hot days, you just fly through both of them, delivering some pretty good whip and an actually forceful loop. The transitions also have some crazy whip, the way you're just kind of turning back and forth, and there are some surprising airtime moments, especially that final pop, or kind of little double up into the brakes, and it's almost like a strangle dive maneuver through the first loop is just wow. Just wow is all I have to say about that. The trains are very comfortable. Mack makes some of my favorite coaster trains as far as just comfort goes. And the ride's pretty smooth and pulls some really good forces in the valleys. Just overall, Copperhead Strike is an awesome ride, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and it's personally my favorite at Carowinds, as of how Fury was running last season. Whenever I get back, we'll have to see if Fury's running better, because it does have the potential to beat Copperhead. But for now, in my controversial opinion, Copperhead Strike is the best coaster at Carowinds. At number 9, we have Thunderhead at Dollywood. This GCI Woodie is like a compact Mystic Timbers, though Thunderhead does focus more on whippy laterals over lateral airtime. The ride is out of control and even better at night. It's just crazy. Even in the front row, the way it just absolutely throws you from one side of the train to the other. And though it does focus more on whip, it does have its fair share of poppy airtime moments. The ride is just a ton of fun, and like, it's a little rough, but fine for a Woodie, and especially because it is a bit of an older Woodie. Like, it's not, super old like PTC Woodies, but it's not brand new like Texas Stingray or even Mystic Timbers. So I think it's the perfect mix of smooth and roughness, which just equates to an amazing GCI Woodie with just crazy laterals, snappy transitions, and pretty good airtime. At number 8, we have Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. I love this RMC Raptor when I rode it. The ride is packed with airtime and whippy inversions, as well as good positives. I didn't find the restraints bad. They aren't the best, but they could be worse, like the older gen restraints. These at least move. To me, they're kind of pointless as far as like the over-the-shoulder soft straps. They didn't really hold me in place. I kind of slid around a lot, but I definitely prefer those to the ones that dig into your shoulders on the prototype Raptors like Wonder Woman. That turnaround, it kind of goes over the station after your first return lap back, is really whippy and snappy, and probably one of the best elements on the ride, which is surprising because a turnaround normally isn't the best element, but that one is just taken at such a high speed and is so tight. It provides good whip, laterals, and surprising pops of airtime on the entry and exit. And when I rode, the mid-course was turned off, so the final run of airtime hills were absolutely killer to my thighs. But man, did they deliver some powerful back-to-back airtime, reminiscent of Steel Vengeance's ending. But to me, Jersey Devil Coaster has a more diverse range of elements than Steel Vengeance, which is what makes it better. At number 7, we have Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. This RMC may be little, but just like Maverick, it packs a punch. The drop is super unique and whippy with the barrel roll down drop. Those 3 back-to-back airtime hill camelbacks are absolutely amazing and deliver some powerful flow-jector airtime. Closer to ejector than flow-jector, but the off-axis hills combine amazing whip and laterals with airtime, and the ride honestly feels like a mini Steel Vengeance with so much ejector airtime, but what makes this better for me is the fact that Twisted Timbers is not as repetitive. Steel Vengeance, after you drop off the mid-course brake run, has a lot of just repeating elements with just back-to-back wave turns, barrel rolls, and airtime hills. This one combines a unique, diverse range of off-axis hills with regular hills with different turns and a couple inversions in there. The trains are kind of uncomfortable, as are the other new gen RMC trains, like Steel Vengeance and Iron Gwazi and RE Force 1. But they don't really detract from the ride. Overall, Twisted Timbers is just an amazing, out-of-control experience, and definitely the best coaster at King's Dominion, without a doubt. At number 6, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot. This is such a unique coaster, being one of a kind. And while the backwards launch isn't super punchy, the rest of the ride is phenomenal. The theming in the queue, as well as the pre-shows, are just really cool. And the trains are also super comfortable with very non-restrictive restraints, as with most of the modern Vekoma restraint. The whole ride is so smooth, and it really does feel like you are actually floating through space. But that doesn't mean the ride doesn't have some amazing forces. The ride is packed with some pretty good vertical G-forces and surprising pops of ejector airtime. And the quote-unquote spinning adds a nice element of surprise. Also, getting September on the last ride just added to the amazing flow that the ride has. And overall, I just thoroughly enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy for its smoothness and surprising forces. At number 5, we have Tron Light Cycle Run at the Magic Kingdom. The reason this ride made it so high for me was because it just surprised me with how good it was. The queue is amazing, with a great view of the first launch, with that amazing reveal from the pre-show, and then you just walk out of the pre-show and there's just the first launch area and you can watch trains take off. The way the trains are designed just makes you feel so floaty, as the knee pads, which no one told me about this, the knee pads actually shift up and down, as do the back pads. So like, not the actual restraint that holds you in, but there is the piece that actually makes contact with your back is allowed to rock back and forth, as are the knee pads on the base of the train where you rest your knees. So just the whole time you're feeling as though you're floating on air as you traverse the different elements. The launch surprised me by how punchy it was. It definitely has one of, if not the most punchy launches in Florida, and has amazing flow-ejector airtime entering and exiting the brake runs and helixes. It's again surprised me with how much airtime it had, because I did not expect it to have any airtime at all. And the helixes actually have some pretty good forces for a Disney coaster. As for the length of the ride, I found it to be a tad short, but much longer than I expected, and not as bad or as short as people say it is. And overall, the only reason that the ride doesn't rank higher, because I don't have a complaint about it, is that it's not as crazy as my top 4. At number 4, we have X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. The original Fourth Dimension coaster is by far the most insane coaster experience I've been on. Let's just talk about the first drop to begin with. The way the seats flip and whip you into a position where you are just facing straight down at the ground is amazing. Then as you plummet straight towards the ground, you feel as if you aren't touching the seats nor the restraints. You just feel as if you're a physical form floating through space. It's just, the feeling is amazing. It's honestly just pure bliss. Then you begin the pullout as the seats flip you back upright and just go into the rest of this crazily disorienting course, which is nothing but insane G-forces and disorienting flip. The airtime hill while flipping provides both insane airtime and whip, and this is by far the most insane and intense coaster I've ever been on, and the only one that gave me that feeling when I rode it. But it's hard to beat that feeling of going down the first drop combined with the disorienting nature of the ride. It's amazing. A little bit rough, especially in that final Raven turn, but just overall amazing, and it doesn't really need to be any longer because it's just so crazy on its own. To begin the top 3, we have Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. This Mack Extreme spinner is definitely extreme. The way you immediately go through a 90-degree drop right out of the station while spinning just gets the ride started off right. The launches I found to be super punchy, and if you're spinning while launching, the whip is insane. It's so fun to go through the vertical loop while being sideways as you're looking at the world upside down, and you don't normally get to do that on a vertical loop. Like, normally you're just facing the track in front of you, but if you're facing sideways, you're normally looking out at the park. So it's weird to see everything upside down. And the Twisted Hill also provides some whippy airtime, especially if you traverse it while spinning. Plus that small little triangle bunny hop into the second launch, especially while backwards, delivers some powerful ejector airtime. I will also say that these trains are probably the most comfortable coaster trains I've ever been in. Did not get stapled, super comfortable, just amazing theming, and the ride is just overall phenomenal. And honestly, 1, 2, and 3 could probably be interexchanged, and even 4, because they are just that good. At number 2, we have Pantheon at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. This is a new generation Intamin Blitz, and holy crap, is this thing amazing. The trains are probably the most open trains I've been on, and they are super comfortable. The launches are crazy punchy. The first launch into the 0G winder is just fun, and then you enter the winder and you're either provided with good whip or amazing airtime, hang time, depending on where you are in the train. The force rollback is fun, and the reverse launch airtime hill has got to be the strongest moment of airtime and the most surprising moment I've ever experienced on any ride. The Outer Bank hill provides some good sustained flow ejector airtime, and the 0G stall actually has hang time. The ride is just perfection, and the only reason Pantheon isn't number 1 is because number 1 is the full package, combining just the right length, theming, inversions, and everything into one. Pantheon would be higher if it was just themed. There is so much you could do to theme this coaster, and unfortunately, Busch Gardens did not take the chance to do so, which is what prevented it from making my personal number 1. Now, for my personal favorite coaster, we have the Jurassic World Velocicoaster, Universal Islands of Adventure. Velocicoaster is the full package, and a phenomenal Intamin Blitz. Starting with the queue. The first room is so grandiose, and the Raptor statue with the lighting sequences. Then you have the hallway next to the second launch where you can see trains zooming by, followed by the Raptors. Then the room where you have props and artifacts from the movie, as well as the original model for the coaster train. You then enter the stables with the two best animatronics Universal has ever created, and maybe some of the best animatronics at any theme park. These Raptors are so phenomenal and lifelike, and they definitely took it up to the next level with realism. The locker setup is nice, as it is very close to the station and double-sided, so it's very quick and easy to get to. After the metal detectors, you climb to the second story with a fun pre-show before the amazing station that looks out into the Raptor paddock. I absolutely love the theming and details of the trains combined with the lighting package, when it works, and they're super comfortable. Not as open as Pantheon's, even though they are the same train type with the same restraint style. It's just because Velocicoaster has extra theming pieces, so it does not feel as open. You then enter the pre-launch area where you see Raptors before a super punchy launch into the Raptor paddock, where there's just nothing but whip and airtime galore as you dodge through rock formations and Raptors, traversing airtime hills and implement a dive loop and other whippy turns. The train then rockets through a low-to-the-ground swooping turn into the second launch, providing some pretty good positive G-forces before that second 70-mile-an-hour launch, where you ascend the amazing top hat, where just as you crest, it seems like the world just stops for a few seconds. And you can just look out and feel like nothing is happening before the train takes off into the second half of this amazing course. The zero-G stall does not provide a lot of hang time, but definitely showcases the speed of the coaster, and the double helix provides some amazing forces and airtime. The Mosasaurus roll is by far the best and whippiest inversion that I have been on, with phenomenal upside-down airtime. As you are flipping, you feel as if you're falling towards the earth before being caught by the restraint and whipped back upright. And then the final double up provides two amazing pops of ejected airtime to end out the ride. Honestly, though, what makes Velocicoaster the best for me is because when I ride it, everything around me just melts away. All my problems, just everything, and it is just me and the ride. The ride is just that good. But that is my top 25 list. Let me know what you guys think, but that is all for now, and I'll see you next time.